I appreciate Soma for a lot of things. For starters, it's a horror game that focuses more on existential dread than spooky jump scares, so even a delicate flower like me can actually stomach it. Also, the writing in here is far above the video game standard, tackling serious philosophical questions like transhumanism and the concept of self in thought-provoking ways. And finally, it also manages to use the player interaction that is unique to games as a means to expand on how it tells its story. And that is what I want to explore today. Needless to say, this video is gonna contain major spoilers for Soma, so if you haven't played it yet but still want to, do that first and come back to this video afterwards, please. You have been warned. First, let's quickly go through the main plot of this game. Soma starts out with the protagonist Simon visiting a lab to get a scan of his brain taken, the reason being that he recently suffered a fatal head injury in an accident that needs to be worked on with experimental brain reconstruction as his only chance of survival. The moment his scan is taken, however, Simon finds himself in a completely different location and time.
What happened? Hello? Mr. Munchie?
It is slowly revealed that he has been transported into an underwater research base 100 years into the future. In this time, humanity faces extinction due to meteor impacts making the Earth's surface uninhabitable. Humans, however, have also made huge strides in technology and are capable of creating a fully functioning simulation of the mind from brain scans, which can be utilized in various ways, like transferring them into virtual realities or letting people load their minds directly into, say, helper robots or diving suits to take direct control and operate them on the bottom of the sea. The reason for Simon being here is that a rogue AI charged with serving humanity found one of his brain scans from 100 years ago and planted it into a diving suit. A bit later, Simon finds the brain scan of Catherine, a researcher who was in charge of the so-called ARC project. The ARC is a solar-powered satellite housing a multitude of brain scans in a virtual simulation. It was supposed to be shot into space as a last-ditch effort to ensure that a few humans can at least escape the planet and survive digitally in the satellite that would be fueled for 1,000 years by the sun. Finding the ARC and making sure it actually launches then becomes the main goal of Simon and Catherine, and thus the player. This concept already brings up classic issues like when during the process of transferring a perfect scan of your mind into a robot or simulation do you stop being an actual person, and much of the game tries to work with these themes. Soma's big twist and probably best moment, however, is delivered when Simon has to switch from the diving suit he was loaded into initially into another one that can withstand higher underwater pressure so that he can travel to a base on the bottom of the sea where the ARC is located. When Catherine loads his consciousness into the new suit, it is revealed that his mind wasn't actually transferred from one body to the other. Since the brain scan is a digital process, it was copied into the suit, meaning that the old Simon, the self he just was, still continues to exist, and Catherine just put it into a momentary sleep state.
Copy completed. There must be something wrong. Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
What was that?
No, it's just...
Why was it still talking?
As you saw, the game switches Simon's view to the new suit the moment he is loaded into it, so that he can then walk up to his old body. This happened the same way at the start of the game when he got his brain scanned in the laboratory and suddenly woke up in the future. Of course, now that he understands that this process actually creates a new being in a way, he is understandably upset.
You realize how messed up this is?
Please, I didn't mean to upset you.
How did you expect me to react to this shit?
Please stop.
You're fucking disgusting.
More importantly, however, this scene is also meant to shock the player and make him feel like he just walked up to a copy of himself. In short, to deliver this twist, Soma needs to immerse the player and make him feel like he is Simon. So how does Soma accomplish this? For one thing, Simon, being from another time and thus taking the fish out of water role, often asks the same questions the player has about how the technology surrounding him works. Additionally, Simon and the player share other feelings, like disorientation during the first scan when you suddenly find yourself in a completely different location. But the camera itself plays an even bigger role. This is fairly trivial and standard procedure in first-person horror games, of course, but the camera in Soma represents both Simon's field of view as well as the player's window into this world. And Simon constantly interacting with objects or running from monsters guided by the input of the players themselves creates this immersive bond between player and character that especially horror games usually rely on. Since Soma doesn't feature resource management or deep mechanics, there's also no UI and the player screen is completely unobstructed, which makes this view more believable. And with the only indication of lost hit points being a distortion that indicates Simon's visual functions are damaged, the game doesn't even show you a health meter. So even though the main character isn't a mute self-insert, Soma uses all of these typical gameplay aspects and the simple interaction with the world to build a bond between him and us as the players and aims to blur the line between them. Then, when Simon's mind is loaded into a new body in the scene we just watched, the continuation of the first-person perspective is what makes it feel like we as ourselves as well as we as Simon have actually switched bodies, since we stay in control of the camera and thus the interaction with the world. Even though we are technically a new copy, this perspective seems familiar, while the Simon we just were looks like a different person to us, and since Simon experiences the world from the same perspective as we do, he has the same reaction to this as well.
God damn you, Kath. 2 Simons? There can't be 2 Simons.
Already we can see how this scene can be delivered way better in a video game than any other medium. A movie could show Simon walking up to his clone, but it would always be the character acting on his own while the viewer passively watches. You could film it in first person obviously, but outside of Hardcore Henry and the found footage genre, the first person perspective has never been a widely used technique in films, because justifying a character holding up a camera the entire time is hard to pull off. Not impossible, but very difficult. A book maybe would have a better shot at this, since it could at least describe the inner thoughts of the character in a monologue while he goes through these scenes, but it'd still be the character acting and us only reading it, at most participating in our imagination, which I would argue still isn't on the same level. No, at least for this twist I'd say neither a book nor a movie could achieve the same immersion as us becoming attached to the main character through the first person perspective and direct player input. But all of this is only the first act. Having the bond between Simon, the player and the camera itself established, Soma then intentionally undermines this whole concept at the end of the game to deliver the final twist. When Simon and Catherine eventually reach the Ark and load all brain scans into it, the only thing left to do before launch is to transfer their own minds over as well, so that they can all leave the Earth together. Soma banks on the player, expecting this to go the same way as earlier. You finish the upload, the screen flashes, and you are somewhere inside the virtual reality of the Ark. However, this happens instead.
4, 3, 2.
Yes! Fuck yeah! We made it! I'm still here. I'm still here. Catherine? Catherine?
I'm here.
As you see, we do not find ourselves on the Ark. Simon's mind was of course again being copied and not actually transferred, meaning that again there are 2 Simons, the new one on the Ark and the old one staying in the base. Only this time around, we don't come along with a new copy. As the scene continues, Catherine explains to him that obviously this is how the process has always worked and he should be happy that their copies will live on in the Ark, to which Simon replies,
Are you crazy? We're gonna die down here with those fuckers living at large on a spaceship. They're not us. They're not us.
He then proceeds to destroy the console in frustration, and considering he's alone on the bottom of the sea, well...
I can't be responsible for your goddamn ignorance!
Fuck! Catherine? Please don't leave me alone. Catherine? Catherine?
What Soma did here is it actively tricked the player. In the beginning of the game, and upon changing suits later, Soma switched the first-person perspective and thus Simon's as well as the player's view into the new body both times. Since a human can only possibly perceive everything around him through his own continuous flow of sensory inputs, thoughts and memories, his faulty perception in the situation would be that the self he feels, the perspective from which he views the world, must be the real one, and so the continuous first-person perspective always made it feel like we were in control of the real Simon. The game even mentions this idea of self through continuity in one of the audio logs you can find, ironically recorded by a character who committed suicide after having his brain scan placed on the Ark, because he was convinced that destroying his physical self would ensure that the digital copy of his mind in the simulation will continue to exist as his real self. But of course, the moment you start thinking about it, this isn't what would actually happen. When a new copy is made, there are now two functionally equal minds, and we can't exactly choose to live on as either or declare one as more real than the other. As a matter of fact, it would be pretty much impossible to experience this phenomenon just with a single human mind, considering that there wouldn't even be a single we or I to live on as, but rather two of them that both would claim to be the actual Simon because that's how it feels to them. So the sensation of switching bodies earlier in the game was just a wrong perception rooted in how we experience our existence, and when it comes to the final most important scan in the game, Soma smashes this concept right in front of our eyes. It breaks its own rules without actually breaking them. This is the kind of story supported by gameplay I want to see more in video games. The first-person perspective is a good representation of how humans that rely predominantly on their sense of vision experience the world, and our control of the main character, coupled with the simple mechanics and non-existent UI, bind us to him and make it feel like he is part of ourselves. With just these simple tools, Soma then connects us to its universe and consequently makes us apply our day-to-day conceptions of how we perceive the world and how we define ourselves as a person to what happens in the game. It seemingly plays along with our interpretation, and then finally, with a simple refusal of changing the camera perspective, hammers down its main message. That these day-to-day concepts we use would not hold up in a world where technology lets you freely create and copy human minds. Soma's intention isn't to provide answers, it wants to provoke you into thinking about these issues for yourself. Simon often wonders about what happens around him, if deactivating a robot that had a human mind loaded into it is murder, or how any kind of afterlife for a soul could exist when there are multiple copies of him running around and his real self died 100 years ago. But no one in the game has answers for him. Of course, any medium could try to make a story that shows these issues, but Soma, using the virtues of gameplay, makes you feel them. And that is what I mean with utilizing the strength of your medium. Bouken signing out.